how is it that you guys get all the cool names like Reaper and Muerto? And I don't get a cool name. I'm just Pete. I don't even look like a Pete.
You want a fucking name? I got a fucking name for you.
Oh, let me guess. Rat. Listen to me. I am not a rat. I'm not a rat, okay? Man, have I ever lied to you?
Why don't you think about that? I mean, really, really think about that. Pinche cabrón.
This man is a top assassin. His specialty is playing the prey in order to kill his opponents. However, recently, the assassin Pete has had a worry in his heart. He realized that he was extremely addicted to killing. As long as Mateo, the boss of the organization, gave the order, no matter what Pete was doing, he would put everything aside to go to the meeting point and complete the mission. For a modern worker, this is really not a good virtue. Therefore, Pete joined a support group for work addiction. He hoped he could soon escape from his work frenzy, but he did not expect that this very action would bring him deadly danger. On the other side, the boss of the assassin organization, Mateo, suddenly received a phone call from a subordinate. He reported that a listening device had been found in the office, and the last person who appeared there was Pete. After hearing this, Mateo's face immediately became extremely unpleasant. Pete was suspected of being the organization's traitor, but at this moment he had no idea at all. After saying goodbye to the members of the support group, he wandered the streets. Looking at ordinary people struggling to make a living, Pete couldn't help but feel a strange emotion. But before he could think any deeper, he was captured by the men sent by the boss. Pete and Christos were old friends. At first, Pete thought Christos was joking with him. He even cracked a few jokes. But he couldn't understand why the conversation suddenly shifted from rugby to torture. Looking at the blazing fire in the furnace, Pete finally realized these men didn't come with good intentions. So he didn't say a word and struck first. For a top assassin, fighting 1 against 10 was absolutely not a problem. Within a few minutes, all of Christos' subordinates were lying collapsed on the floor. He himself was beaten black and blue. Blood was covering him. Seeing this, Pete felt a little reluctant. He kindly advised Christos to go to the hospital for emergency treatment. Unexpectedly at that moment, Christos staggered up. He grabbed a knife and approached Pete. He questioned him about whom he had just met and whether he was planning to betray the assassin organization. Hearing this, Pete was completely bewildered. He hurriedly explained that he had only joined a support group, hoping that with the help of specialists, he could balance work and life. He had not revealed any secrets of the organization, let alone betrayed it. But Christos completely rejected his explanation. He still insisted that Pete was a traitor, and immediately swung the knife in his hand toward him. The two fought again. Pete did not expect that his old friend, even with such serious injuries, still had the strength to fight. Just a little carelessness, and he was thrown to the floor by Christos. Luckily, at the last moment, Christos lost too much blood and fainted. Still not understanding what was happening, Pete took Christos's phone to call an ambulance before turning and leaving. After that, Pete went to a bar, but unexpectedly, as soon as the owner Mora saw him, she frowned. It turned out that the two had once had a relationship, but because Pete was too obsessed with work, they didn't even have time to date. In the end, Mora couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to break up. What was notable was that this bar owner was not just an ordinary bar owner, but also the daughter of the assassin organization's boss, Mateo. Although Pete still had feelings in his heart, Mora did not like to be entangled with her ex-boyfriend, so she did not hesitate to order him out. Seeing this, Pete immediately pretended to be pitiful. He said that recently he had been in great pain and needed alcohol to numb his nerves. Reluctantly, Mora poured him a glass of wine. After knowing that her ex-boyfriend was regarded by her father as a traitor, she instinctively frowned. She thought that Pete showing up here tonight was deliberately to cause trouble for her. Although Pete explained it was not like that, Mora did not believe him at all. Just as she was about to kick him out of the bar, a man at the table behind suddenly stood up aggressively and walked over to Pete. Clearly, this group of people were also assassins sent by Mateo, but the opponent did not strike immediately. Instead, he arrogantly mocked Pete as a sewer rat. Pete did not care at all about these insults that did not hurt. It turned out that the burly ringleader was named Orlando. He held such a grudge because not long ago, he had invited Pete to his daughter's birthday, but Pete did not attend, which made him lose face. Seeing Orlando draw a sharp weapon, Pete immediately prepared a fighting stance to engage. Although Mora and Pete had broken up many years ago, between her father's subordinates and her ex-boyfriend, clearly the latter was still a little more important. Along with Mora's 6 consecutive shots, the assassins fighting Pete instantly collapsed. With their coordinated cooperation, the group of assassins was quickly beaten badly. Orlando, unwilling to admit defeat, sneered as he stood up, confident that Mora had run out of bullets. As a result, in just the next second, he received a huge surprise. Pete wanted his ex-girlfriend to call her father and ask what was really going on, but Mora said she had already helped him too much. Whether it was cleaning up the battlefield in the past, or the subordinates lying all over the ground today. Although she knew Pete was not a traitor this time, Mora was determined to be an outsider. Pete had to deal with the remaining troubles himself. Seeing that she no longer cared about their past relationship, Pete decided to look for friends for help. But just as he stepped out of the bar, he was stuffed into a car by another group of assassins. The man in glasses leading them was named Mingjue, clearly also an old acquaintance of Pete. Moreover, the two even had some personal grudges. Facing the same question, Pete once again insisted that he had not betrayed. He even curiously asked how much Mateo had paid them that was worth coming from all over the world to hunt him down. When he found out it was only a mere $500,000, Pete felt he was being undervalued. He had devoted half his life loyally, yet in the end, he was only worth $500,000. He probed Mingjue, asking if he could call the boss so he could personally explain the situation. But Mingjue immediately saw through his little scheme. The plan failed, so Pete had to think of another way. At that moment, he noticed that the two assassins beside him were holding stun batons. Right after that, a bold plan instantly formed in his mind. Taking advantage of the moment when Mingjue in the passenger seat was off guard, Pete struck continuously with both hands. He used the seatbelt to strangle Mingjue, while the driver busy steering could not turn around to counterattack. As long as he took down the two underlings in the back seat, Pete could temporarily evade the assault of these men. In the end, under the power of two stun guns, all four people in the car were knocked unconscious. After the danger was resolved, he threw them onto the road and quickly drove away from the scene. Not long after, Pete arrived at a dock. He had barely gotten out of the car and was not yet steady on his feet. His close friend Christos suddenly rushed out from an LV and pointed a gun at him. He did not understand why just joining a support group made everyone treat him as a traitor. Even his best friend Christos was no exception. Pete took the opportunity to disarm him and demanded that the other explain himself, but Christos would not listen at all. He even questioned Pete. "Did you think about my current situation when you came to me, regardless of everything? Did you think about the danger you would bring to my family?" Christos believed Pete's actions were very selfish. As he spoke, he tried to grab the gun back, only to have Pete remove the magazine. When he learned that Pete had joined a support group, Christos bluntly said, "Could it be that the FBI has started using this method as a disguise?" In any case, he was still convinced Pete was a traitor. The two exchanged words and then fought. In the chaos, Christos's phone fell to the ground. Just as they were fighting fiercely, a call suddenly came in. The moment the ringtone rang, both of them tacitly stopped. The call was from Christos's wife. Hearing his panting voice, she thought he was with another woman. Luckily, Pete spoke up in time to explain for Christos. Only then did the other finally remove the doubts in his heart. It could be seen that Christos and Pete had a very good relationship, to the point that even family members trusted each other. Right after hanging up the phone, the two still stubbornly rushed to fight again. Christos also felt that Pete was too selfish. How many times had he invited Pete to his house, yet he never came? Even when his daughter was hospitalized, Pete did not visit. After all, Christos believed that in Pete's eyes, aside from missions, nothing else mattered. He did not care about friends at all. After the fight, Christos seriously analyzed the problem. If Pete truly had not betrayed, the only solution was to find the issue and make peace with the boss. Otherwise, the number of people hunting him down would only increase. After saying this, Christos returned to the LV. Although Pete still believed he was not wrong, he was forced to admit that Christos's words made sense. Meeting Mateo directly was unrealistic. The best way was still to persuade Mora for help. Therefore, after leaving the dock, Pete hurried to look for his ex-girlfriend again. When she learned that he had just gone to see Christos, Mora bluntly said that everyone had their own life. Whether it was family, hobbies, or friends, none of that was related to work. Only Pete was immersed in his busy missions, ignoring everyone who cared about him. Pete intended to stand up to argue, but before he could say a word, he was shot down by Mora with a tranquilizer dart. The scene shifted. Pete was sitting in a room surrounded by colleagues from the assassin organization. He was about to complain to everyone, when suddenly, a masked person appeared in front of him. Before he could understand what was happening, 10 guns were already pointed straight at him. Fortunately, it was only a nightmare. Seeing his panicked appearance, Mora could not help but find it amusing. But she was very angry that Pete had caused trouble at the bar during the day, and was now showing up here in such a pitiful state at night. She believed that Pete completely treated her as a tool. But just as she finished speaking, the main door was smashed open by a group of assassins. Without asking, it was clear they had been sent by Mateo. The long-haired leader, looking determined, immediately ordered his men to handcuff Pete. But before they could act, Mora shot them down with tranquilizer darts. Next, the long-haired leader also lost consciousness in astonishment. Facing the 4 remaining subordinates, Pete and Mora were more than capable of handling them. Seeing Pete being restrained by one of them, Mora did not hesitate to step forward and help. In the end, under the tacit cooperation of the 2, the 4 subordinates were all knocked unconscious. Pete believed that she still had feelings for him. Therefore, he took advantage of this moment to sincerely express his love to Mora. Although Mora did not deny those feelings, she knew very well that with Pete's current situation, he could not balance work and life. She also frankly admitted that compared to her love for Pete, she loved herself more. Pete then said that he wanted to change the current situation, and the first step he had to take was to personally call the boss, Matteo. At the same time, at Matteo's place, 3 assassins who had been beaten black and blue were complaining to him. The boss felt very annoyed. Clearly, he had sent top experts out, yet they returned as cripples. But the 3 assassins did not notice Matteo's mood, and even bragged that they were the real masters in the organization. At that moment, Matteo's anger finally exploded. He loudly shouted at them to shut up. Orlando said that when he tried to kill Pete, Mora always interfered, and even broke one of his legs. As a father who loved his daughter, how could Matteo tolerate that? He immediately warned him. Mora's character was like her father's, unlike useless disgraces like them. At this moment, Matteo's phone rang. It was Pete calling from Mora's phone. Hearing the voice of the traitor, Matteo thought he had kidnapped his daughter. Pete immediately explained to the boss that he would never betray anyone in the organization and could never harm the 2 of them. It turned out that many years ago, Pete was just a wanderer. Matteo was the one who gave him a job and a family. When he learned that Pete was dating his daughter, he even treated him as family. And now, the reason Matteo was so angry was because he felt he had placed his trust in the wrong person. However, hearing this, Pete could not help but retort. I have solved so many problems for you, yet now you send people to hunt me down and only pay the assassins $500,000 in reward. At least raise the price a little so I can feel it is fairer. These words immediately angered Matteo. He immediately warned Pete to know the difference between king and soldier. He said that if he wanted to end being hunted, he must provide evidence to prove that he was not a traitor. However, the deadline was only until dawn tomorrow. Otherwise, he would increase the bounty until Pete was killed. After hanging up the phone, Pete did not know what to do. At that moment, Mora suddenly thought of Angel. As long as she was killed, Pete could definitely prove his innocence. Angel had been Matteo's mortal enemy for many years. If Pete really killed her, the rumors of him being a traitor would automatically disappear. But Mora also said that this plan was truly too crazy, because Angel's right-hand man was a notorious figure in the underworld. Although the plan was full of difficulties, they currently had no better option and had to risk taking action. After that, Mora opened her armory. Inside were all kinds of densely packed treasures. These were all things Matteo had prepared for her. Due to the urgent time, the 2 immediately set out. Before long, they arrived outside Angel's building. Under the cover of Mora's sniper rifle, Pete quietly slipped into the yard and quickly took down a guard. To avoid causing alarm once inside, Pete switched his weapon to a wooden stick. At that moment, sounds of laughter came from afar. Pete went in to check and discovered a guard secretly playing during his shift. So he rushed forward with the stick, but unexpectedly, these people turned out to be so weak. Before he could strike, the door slammed shut. On the rooftop, Mora was watching with great interest, completely unaware that a figure was approaching from behind. Just as Pete finished dealing with the guards, he ran into another person. Their eyes met, time seemed to freeze, and then a gunshot shattered the silence. A fierce battle erupted in the cramped room. At this moment, everything around suddenly became quiet. Pete hid behind cover and observed the surroundings. Just as he was about to pull out a grenade to throw, a man courting death appeared behind him. Anticipating his position, Pete immediately shoved the grenade with the pin pulled into the man's mouth. With a loud explosion, the man was instantly blown to pieces. However, the troublesome problem was that more and more people kept appearing. Pete found it hard to withstand for the moment. In danger, he decisively jumped down a hole in the ground, falling into the basement and narrowly escaping death. But before he could breathe, a sigh of relief, more enemies rushed in. As the most dangerous assassin in the organization, Pete did not fear this small encirclement. Taking advantage of the moment when the opponents were searching for their target, he quietly hid behind cover. He waited for his prey to appear so he could strike fatally. Pete continued deeper into the basement to find his target still unaware that Mora had been captured. Elsewhere, Mora had been invited for tea. The beautiful woman in the red dress in front of her was none other than their target, this time, Angel. For many years, she and Matteo had opposed each other, both openly and secretly. Therefore, she was, of course, not unfamiliar with his daughter. She wanted to know why Mora did not live a good life, but instead risked coming to assassinate her. Unless the man outside was very important. Angel and Matteo were mortal enemies who had maintained a certain delicate balance over the years. Although most of Angel's dealings were on the border of the law, Mora deeply hated her ruthless working style. Angel could easily dismiss those words. But just as the atmosphere became tense, Angel suddenly changed the subject and mentioned Mora's brother. From Mora's expression, it was not hard to see that there was another grievance between them. It turned out that many years ago, Mora's brother had once done business with Angel, but due to an accident, he died tragically. This was also one of the reasons Matteo and Angel became enemies. After that, Mora said that she did not know Pete was outside. She had only been dealing with some private matters on the rooftop opposite. She did not know why she had been brought here. Just as the situation grew tense, a loud explosion suddenly rang out from outside. The head assistant immediately went out to check. Realizing the situation was not good, Angel also picked up her weapon, ready to respond at any moment. Mora worried for Pete's safety. She only wanted to escape quickly. She said this matter had nothing to do with her. But unexpectedly, Angel had seen through everything and even knew that her relationship with Pete was not ordinary. At this point, both of them were completely exposed. At the same time, the assistant discovered the target. Noticing something unusual, he immediately opened fire. Pete failed to dodge in time and was grazed. Seeing the enemy drawing closer, he did not hesitate to throw his weapon to create a distraction, and took the opportunity to change position. But the head assistant, being Angel's most capable subordinate, was not so simple. Realizing Pete's plan, he acted decisively, giving his opponent no chance to breathe. Cornered Pete threw his only stun grenade, almost bursting the assistant's eardrums. Taking advantage of his opponent's pain, Pete charged without hesitation. Although the assistant had just been seriously injured, Pete still did not gain any advantage over him. As the fight gradually entered its climax, the stamina of both had decreased significantly. At this point, what truly determined the outcome was their endurance. Pete realized he could not continue fighting like this, otherwise dawn would come and exceed the agreed time. So he immediately pulled out a plastic bag from behind and tightened it over his opponent's head. With great force, the assistant collapsed to the floor. Pete took the opportunity to press down on him and used both hands to choke his neck until he was completely motionless. Elsewhere, the explosion also affected Angel's office. Before she could understand what was happening, Mora seized the opportunity to snatch her pistol. The strength of the mafia boss's daughter was indeed extraordinary. In the first round, Angel was no match for her, but as Angel's state improved, she took off her obstructive high heels and began a real fight with Mora. The two fought back and forth for a while with no clear winner. Taking advantage of the moment when she fell to the ground, Mora kicked Angel hard. Then she quickly stood up and spun 360 degrees, leaving Angel completely disoriented. Angel was more frenzied than ever. Mora was choked and immediately fell into a passive position. If she continued to be suppressed like this, she would suffocate in just moments. Luckily, at that moment, Pete heard the commotion and rushed over. But just as he was about to charge in to help, he sensed someone else was there. Sure enough, a figure suddenly appeared in the darkness and without a word, lunged at Pete. After many successive rounds of fighting, Pete's body was clearly unable to withstand it anymore. In just a moment, he was successfully subdued by the opponent. At this moment, Mora was still struggling. In the life or death instant, she felt a rope on the floor and used its sharp end to tighten around Angel's arm, barely escaping her restraint. However, the frenzied Angel still did not stop. This time, she chose a thick book and pressed it hard against Mora's neck, determined to personally end this trouble. At the same time, Pete was also in a similar predicament. Angel's subordinate, the man with the braid, was not weak at all. Facing Pete's resistance, he could always easily neutralize it. Finally, he seized the opportunity to lock Pete tightly from behind. At this point, both Mora and Pete were in the same dangerous situation. If they did not act in time, both would suffocate. Seeing Mora's pained expression, Pete, somehow summoning courage, immediately pulled the pin of a grenade. He forcefully hurled it straight at his opponent's face. With the grenade's explosion, Pete barely managed to escape from him. After that, he charged straight at the target Angel. Gathering all his strength, he delivered a punch to her. The punch directly knocked out one of Angel's front teeth. Mora furiously rushed in and shoved the pill that had once killed her brother into Angel's mouth. Soon, Angel foamed at the mouth, writhing painfully on the floor, and finally became completely motionless. Now the great vengeance had been taken. Mora felt relieved in her heart. At this point, they only needed to do one more thing to complete the mission. After that, the two grabbed a camera from the shelf and took crazy selfies with Angel's corpse. On their way back, the two sat on the street and confided. After this incident, both realized the importance of the other. Pete also woke up to the fact that he had wasted his life all these years. Now he wanted to return to Mora to shoulder the responsibilities he had never taken so that his life would become more meaningful. At this moment, Matteo received the news and came. It turned out he had long known that Pete was not a traitor. It could even be said that everything had been deliberately arranged by him. The reason he let Pete prove his innocence on his own was because Matteo had always regarded him as an heir to be nurtured. Now, he had successfully eliminated Angel. He not only won the wholehearted submission of his subordinates, but also took the opportunity to resolve the hidden threat in his heart. One arrow hitting two targets, why wouldn't he do it? In the end, Mora and Pete got back together. Many years later, they had a pair of adorable twins and raised a fluffy dog. From then on, they lived a happy and fulfilling life. The story ends here. The film, with its dark humor, exposed the imbalance between work and life. When a top assassin fell into crisis because of being too immersed in work, in the midst of fleeing and counterattacking, he suddenly became enlightened. True strength was not deadly stabs, but the ability to balance work and relationships. The film reminds us, do not let passion become shackles, and do not let career overshadow the warmth of life, because the ultimate meaning of life lies in the warmth of love and being loved. The story ends here today. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this film? Please leave a comment below.